Welcome everybody back to Alabama Care today, and we will silence this so we don't get back. We are in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and we are going to be talking about employment opportunities for individuals and employers. And we have Mrs. Leslie Dawson and Mrs. Jamie Mitchell with us. And Mrs. Dawson, if you would introduce yourself.
Glad to. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate being back with you guys today. My name is Leslie Dawson, and I am the statewide administrator of the Business Relations Program with the Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services Vocational Rehabilitation Program.
That's quite a mouthful.
Yes, it is.
And Mrs. Mitchell, if you would introduce yourself.
Sure, I'm Jamie Mitchell. I'm a Human Resources Business Partner for the University of Alabama, and I'm the Program Manager for a special initiative for individuals with disabilities. And I want to say thank you for having me here today to talk about our program.
Well, we appreciate you guys being here, and it's an important topic, employment. I know it's been a big push in the community for quite a number of years, and I think we're seeing more opportunities for individuals in the community to really get out there and find meaningful employment. And I think in general society, it's become a lot better for individuals. Is there anything that comes to mind about employment in general when I just said that?
Well, when I think about employment in general, I think about especially this month, which is National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And so there are a lot of celebrations and recognitions going on all across the nation in regards to individuals with disabilities and employment. More specifically, a person with a disability's contribution to the workforce and kind of their creativity and what they're bringing to the table.
Yeah, I think it's important to have meaningful employment. You want to get up and you want to be a member of society and you want to feel good about the work that you do and the people you work with for anybody. And being able to do that is a big part of a successful life and feeling good about it and having dignity in what you do. Now, you guys do a lot of the work on the back end and helping those relationships grow. And if you would just give an overview and an introduction of the VR Business Relations Program.
So as you mentioned, vocational rehabilitation is traditionally known for the services that we provide to an individual with a disability in helping them to achieve their career goals or maybe retain a job or advance in employment. But in order to do that, we have to have a very good understanding of where the business is coming from, what their needs are, what they're looking for as far as employees, skills, qualifications, and really what the job requires for any worker. And so the Vocational Rehabilitation's Business Relations Program works very closely with Alabama businesses and industry in order to assist them in their disability and employment needs.
Now, what age does that kind of start?
Well, we actually start with vocational rehab with our consumers at about age 15 to 16. It kind of depends. We start to identify individuals with disabilities when they're in high school. And the age range can go all the way up to whenever, somebody just no longer wants to work.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of your department is in relationships with employers and making sure that employers know what's available and how to attract individuals that have a disability there. Now there is okay, thank you, Mrs. West. She said your mic was a little bit down, so your mic is back up. I did it over here. Now when you hear disability inclusion, what does that mean for employers?
That's a really great question. So disability inclusion is kind of, honestly, in the past 5 to 6 years, maybe a little bit less, becoming a big buzzword in the business world. And so disability inclusion can mean a lot of different things to companies depending on various aspects. For example, for a small to medium-sized business, disability inclusion may really be about looking at expanding the workforce to find employees who have special skills, special traits or abilities. An individual with a disability naturally is a problem solver, right? And so a person brings that with them to work and can carry over that ability into the workplace. So disability inclusion may be like, hey, I want to, enhance my workforce that way. Mm-hmm. For a large business or maybe a corporation, disability inclusion may be part of a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. And it may also be part of a business relations group. It may also encompass various things like, let's face it, regulations, or I guess compliance is the best word. We don't like that term because we are more of a partner. We are not enforcement. We don't come out and say, oh, this law or this rule isn't being followed. We are here as a resource to assist a company, but you do have federal contractors who have to follow certain rules and regulations, and one of those is active outreach and recruitment of individuals with disabilities. And then, of course, any business who has 15 or more employees falls up underneath the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that covers reasonable accommodations in the application, interview portion of work, as well as, job retention and promotion and things like that. So again, disability inclusion can really fit in any of those areas, it's a brand new horizon out there, I guess you could say, and we are here to be a resource for employers when it comes to that. And
I imagine employers are very excited about that, especially right now when they're saying it's tough to find employees and great workers. A few follow-up questions to that. What's the difference between a small, medium-sized business versus a large?
So when you look at size range, you can find that definition in a lot of different areas.
I've heard like small is up to 50, medium's like 50 to 100 or 200.
So, right. And then, large, when we look at a small to large, we're looking at that range. 50, what you would call your mom and pop stores, mm-hmm. and then up to 100, maybe up to 200 for a medium-sized business, and then anything above that would be large.
Any general kind of percentages there for individuals that are hired with those companies? Would you say it's 50-50 from small to medium to large, or is it more focused on the mom and pop?
Honestly, I think it ranges, and it really depends on the area that the business is located. Of course, COVID has changed everything, and so I think if it's okay for me to make this point, with National Disability Employment Awareness Month, there's always a theme every month, and so this year's theme is America's Recovery Driving Inclusion, and the interesting statistic that is out there right now through the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that there has been, from just month to month, increase of people with disabilities in the workforce. Mm-hmm. So over every month it has increased. And what's interesting is that the number of individuals without disabilities has been decreasing, and employers are definitely seeing that. Yeah. But I think what has not been paid attention to is the increase of individuals with disabilities being in the workforce. Yeah. And so they really truly are driving America's recovery.
Yeah, it's the secret sauce.
Absolutely.
And I also I love how you mentioned that, individuals that are going for employment, they bring a certain skill set with them because they may have overcome challenges that they've had to hone in their self-advocacy and learn to speak up. And that can carry over into a workplace when they see deficiencies and they say, hey, maybe we do it this way, and help the business there. And the critical thinking skills that they bring with them, mm-hmm. to navigate these challenges for themselves, then bringing it into the business for the employer and their others that they work with. Mm-hmm. Is a very valuable thing. I think critical thinking is far underlooked, and that doesn't jump out right at you on a resume. Right. So you have to figure that out in an interview and then on the job there. Do you ever think that you mentioned regulations there, and ADA compliance, and those two words, regulation and compliance? Now, do you think that some businesses are hesitant to reach out to you because they feel like they're going to be scolded or certain things like that? And I know that you're more of a partner rather than compliance, but do you ever feel like people are a little bit like, I'm not sure if we're doing it right, so I'm afraid to go that route?
I think that may be the initial reaction. Sometimes, and I've actually seen this more recent than not, the business just doesn't realize that they need to do that. That they're a federal contractor and they are responsible for doing outreach and recruitment. I do think that for those businesses who maybe don't have to do it, they just have not really taken the time to look at, oh wow, there's a lot of value in hiring individuals with disabilities. And I think that another thing, as you said, is a bit of a fear. Maybe not so much as fear of not being compliant or not following regulations, but more of a fear of, I don't know what to do. It's an uncomfort, level.
Something
it's
new.
out of my comfort zone, right? And so we try to come in and help relieve.
Take them by the hand and say it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, for maybe a new business that's thinking about contacting you or getting into the space of hiring, what does that process look like for them? Or what would be a few steps there that they could say, okay, I watched this, I know what the process is going to look like starting out?
Great question. So we have business relations consultants all across the state. So the good news is that there will be somebody in their area that they can meet with, have a one-on-one conversation, and form that relationship and partnership with. So they would basically meet with a business relations consultant, and they would start talking about what the needs of the company is. Sometimes the needs of the company is immediate hiring, especially right now in today's economy, but some additional needs may be job retention. We may have individuals who, due to COVID perhaps, or just age, or accidents, injuries, that have acquired disabilities, and so we can come in and assist in job accommodations for that. So the process is, let's talk about your needs, let's talk about the supports that we can provide for you. I think it's important that employers realize, when they have that first desire to do hiring, recruitment and hiring of individuals with disabilities, that is fabulous. That is taking that first step. But also I think that you have to understand that with that step, you have to prepare your workplace and you have to prepare your workforce for doing things a little different, or maybe not necessarily doing it differently, just doing something new.
Yeah.
And it may take a little extra learning and introduction to some things, but once you do that, you've opened up the door to some amazing results, not only with your employees that you will hire, but with your existing employees. Motivation and true involvement comes into play. And then you also look at your customer base. So customers tend to shop at places where they feel like they are reflected, where their culture is reflected within that company. And so I can't tell you how many people say, I go and shop there because they have hired an individual with a disability, and I have somebody in my family that has a disability, and so I'm going to really be a customer for that company.
I love hearing stories where that. I heard a story where an individual.
Oops.
Well, the lights turned out on us there, guys.
I think all
Sorry.
of
That is not our
ours
equipment,
went
so
out.
for anybody watching,
I'll grab
there might
them.
be a light on the wall there.
I'll grab
For
it.
everybody tuning in today,
Sorry.
we are a man down, Clifton.
There we
is not
go.
with us today.
Oh, we're too still.
So we got some technical things sometimes, but this is not the equipment. This is the room lighting.
Sorry about that. So in our
Yeah.
effort to be environmentally,
If we don't move, it just shuts off.
It was, yeah, that's the
sorry
thermostat.
about that.
No, but I love those stories where I heard a story where a kid, I'll say a kid because he's younger than I am, but ran his own restaurant and his father helped him there. and he had autism, or I can't remember exactly what he was saying, but the energy of the store, and I was just watching that, I'm like, I want to eat there every day. And I relate to that because I have a family member with a disability, and to see others supporting that, I want to support that movement and that cause there.
All right.
And I think it's, for an employer, if you're looking for maybe like a fresh take, it's always good to kind of shake things up a little bit, and new things come out of that. You get new individuals on the team, and new ideas come out of that. So it's a great opportunity hiring an individual with a disability. Now, when we get to hiring, most people think that all you have to do is put up something on Indeed and say you're looking for this person. And then reviewing the applicant and maybe having them come in for an interview and hire them, and then that's pretty much it. But what is that process? Is there more to hiring than just that?
There is, and I think that process, because of that process, it's important to have a partner and have some programs and folks that you can work with, because when you put a job out there, maybe on Indeed or someplace like that, you'll get a lot of applications. And by working with a partner, one thing that we are capable of doing is to do some pre-screening. We can already know if the candidate's going to need some accommodations, know if they meet those qualifications and skills needed to be successful in the job. The other thing, as I mentioned before, is you need to prepare your company, your workplace. And by prepare, I don't mean have to go make a whole lot of changes. It really involves training. So maybe doing some disability awareness training with your staff. Maybe doing some accommodations, reasonable accommodation, ADA sort of training with your supervisors and managers, so that they understand what that interactive process is in discussing needed accommodations. So it's putting those sorts of things in place. If you have a large company and you're able to do an employee resource group, then maybe looking at, am I going to need to have a new employee resource group around disability, or can we add that to an existing employee resource group? So there's some things that are helpful to put in place.
Now, when you go over that, there might be an employer that thinks that means more time. I'm going to have to pay people to not necessarily do the job that I've hired them for, but to go in and training, and maybe more out-of-pocket expenses up front. And what would you say to that?
Well, I would say we have some assistance or solutions for that as well.
Okay.
We offer, through vocational rehabilitation, several different what we call work incentives. So we have what we call pre-hire paid work experiences, where we are able to place an individual at a job site to let them try the job, learn the job skills, let the employer observe, try them out, see if it's a good fit, and we actually pay the salary for the individual and cover workers' comp and that sort of thing, so that all of the,
So there's no upfront there.
Right, exactly. So all that's covered, but it's a great opportunity to really bring the two together, the employee and the employer, and see if it is a good job match.
Yeah, and I feel like as soon as that opportunity occurs, it's almost like there are probably not a lot of situations where that's not successful. If there's a good fit with the need of the company, and the employee has the skills, as soon as they get on the job, it's like, yeah, we definitely want this person on the team.
Exactly. And what's really great about that as well is that there doesn't have to be a job opening. It can be a way that an employer says, hey, I really want to contribute. I can't hire right now, but we want to, do something. And so they can have it as a training area for an individual with a disability as well. And so the person may not go to work for that employer, but they've now improved their skills, gained some extra experience, and they can then use that to find a job at another place.
Yeah, that real world experience is huge.
Right, it really is.
Now, how can the individual, can they do that a few times until they find a good fit?
Well, we're very, before we put one of those, a PWE is what we call them,
Yeah.
pre-hire paid work experience in place, we really try to hone in on, okay, does this person have those pre-qualifications and the aptitude to do the job once they get that on-the-job training. And so, sometimes we get it just right, and all they're going to need is one. But sometimes we may get in there and realize we thought this was going to be a perfect fit, but it's not. So then we just kind of step back and we're like, okay, is there a different job that we need to look at? And so that may be a time that we may do that again.
Mm-hmm.
But it kind of goes along with their abilities and what other qualifications they have. So
Yeah.
I would say possibly, yeah.
When we're going over this, I see ads a lot for like an Indeed or a ZipRecruiter over the radio, stuff like that. But you guys are really a matchmaker.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I love best about it is the individual receiving services through VR for years, most likely.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what's going to be a good fit for them and what their interests are. And as an employer, you hear all these ads, don't go with ZipRecruiter. Call ADRS.
That's right.
It'll do wonders for the fit for your team and your company, and provide dividends long term for your business and customers overall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'd like to highlight a success story. Is there one that jumps out to you?
Well, yes, actually, that's why I'm glad we have our partner here with us today from the University of Alabama. So, as Jamie said, we've been working for about the past 2 years. Usually it doesn't take that long, but COVID set everything back a little bit. But the university was very interested in a lot of the services that we provide, but one in particular was the paid work experience. And so we worked in partnership with them to create, make a few changes, make it really match what the university needed. But long story short, we were able to match one of our VR consumers who had about 5 years ago had a car accident that left him paralyzed. And so he had, basically for the past 5 years been adjusting and getting acclimated to all of the changes, and then he got to the point where he's like, okay, I'm ready to go back to work. And so we were like, okay, great. And the thing that I think a lot of people have to consider, and this is why it's great to have a partnership with the employer and do a PWE, is that once somebody, especially in his situation with a significant disability and being on Social Security disability and going back to work is going to impact that. So we have to make sure it's a really good job match, so that we're not going to jeopardize what his work incentives are. And so we worked in tandem with the university, Jamie especially, and she, from the employer side of things, identified what she felt would be a good job match, and we just kind of brought it all together. And so over the process and the pre-hire work experience, so that some of the expenses were covered, but the employer was safe on wage and hour, we were able to place him in a position that he just excelled in.
Yeah.
And he's employed with them now, so it's just a fantastic opportunity.
Now, can we talk about the kind of job that he's doing, or is that a little bit too in-depth?
Well, it's administrative. We'll say that administrative assistant job. We did have to come in and look at reasonable accommodations, and because he wasn't an employee of the university, then vocational rehab came in and looked at what kind of assistance would he need. During a PWE, we would look at putting some things in place, and then he could then carry those over and use those on the job.
Yeah.
So we work in tandem again with the employer to say, is this allowed? Can we put this in place? And could this you know, if you were to be hired later, could it be used as a reasonable accommodation? So there's a lot of things.
Yeah, it sounds like very in depth for that individual, but it worked out completely.
Right.
And I love how you pointed out that, you know, part of that process was looking at maybe some of the benefits that the individual was receiving and making sure they lined up with the incentives. As I feel like some individuals may be a little reluctant to seek employment, especially if it's going to start affecting their benefit, their Social Security, you know, insurance, that kind of stuff. But to be confident moving forward that everything's going to work out, because you wouldn't want to get a job and have your benefits reduced and then not have that job work out. And it's going to take a month or two or whatever that looks like to make sure those benefits rise up again.
Right.
It's paperwork, basically.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
And that's going to transition us over to the University of Alabama. Mrs. Mitchell, if you would give us just a little bit more background about your journey.
My journey,
and
okay.
how that came to University of Alabama.
Sure. So, as I said, I've been with the university about 3 years. As far as my journey in this initiative, kind of a funny story. I did have a little bit of experience in working with individuals with disabilities. I had worked for Bama Dining, which is part of the university Airmark, and we had a lot of outreach programs. So I had worked with Peace Program and Easter Seals. I had met Leslie. I wouldn't say I knew her directly, but I had met her in dealing with some different employees and some programs. And so that was my first kind of, I'll say, as a coordinator and recruiter, meeting individuals and trying to place them. And I found it a great asset to the company. And so for Airmark. Then when I came to the University of Alabama, as far as my journey here, I usually chuckle. I was a rather new employee and walked through a conference room one day, and I say fortunately for me, I walked through the conference room. There was a group of people talking about doing more for individuals with disabilities. University of Alabama has a robust diversity and equity inclusion program as an institution of higher education. They already had many programs for individuals with disabilities, whether it was supportive programs like through Crossing Points, RISE program. We work with students in autism through UACS, a nationally recognized adapted athletics program. So they already had many things, but universities always pushing themselves to exceed to excellence. And so there was conversation going on about what more can we do, especially in employing individuals with disabilities. We were definitely compliant with all of the regulations, but it was more, do more. And so someone had recognized me from Bama Dining, and I had heard them talking, and I said, oh, I'll volunteer. I thought it was maybe something for Crossing Points because I had worked with Crossing Points like on a Saturday or Thursday. I was like, sure, I'll help. I'll volunteer. Being the new employee, trying to, put a accolade on myself or anyhow. And the next week, the Vice President of Human Resources sent me an email saying, please come up with an initiative. And I was like, what did I do to myself? Yes, because I don't have a background in working with individuals with disabilities. I'm not formally educated in that. Human resources, of course, we're always engaging with people, and we recognize diversity is important. But I was a little hesitant. And so, not to keep rambling on about things, but my story can tell you how I came to Leslie, but that's how the program began. And the initiative was small. It was kind of, I'm going to say grassroots, and we're still in our infancy as we grow this program. And I think that was more a part of me said, let's start with this. Let's do it right. Let's just not throw a program out there. And how much can I take on, so to speak? And so I started in the first area with a RAVE program and talking to Leslie. We really began working first with the individuals who are on campus who maybe incurred an illness or injury or already had a disability or incurred a disability, and how we could work at retaining them, providing additional services. I personally have found that while ADA is there, many times an individual doesn't know what to request. And that is where my partnership with, the university's partnership, but Leslie and I have grown so accustomed to speaking to one another. Sometimes I reference me and I just because I'm talking to her all the time. But the university wanted to provide more for those. And so we have some great success stories in the RAVE program.
Now, the RAVE program.
Yep. So that is a program through ADRS, and it stands for Retain a Valued Employee. And so we use, I'm going to have to say, the great thing about this partnership, not the university, but more me. As I was growing the initiative, I needed someone to walk side by side with me. When you asked her the questions about people being concerns, employers, I was self-aware that, hey, this is not my background, and I want to make sure I do this right. I don't want to take a misstep, that this is an important initiative. And so really when I was out researching what other companies were doing, what processes they had, and looking for someone to give me guidance, I actually recalled Leslie from working at Bama Dining, and then reached out to someone and said, who is that person? What was her name? How can I speak with her? And boy, she just opened the floodgates right there.
Sending you documents like, you need to read this.
Oh, no, well, you know what? That's where it's better then. She came and met with me. And she let me explain what I thought we were doing. And then she said, we can do this, we can do this, we can do this. I can be your partner, you know. And she wasn't pushing anything. It was a true partnership. Let me help support you. And I'm going to say her whole team, and when I say the two of us, keep in mind there are many parts to this one body making it happen for people, whether it's with the individual that we just talked about. It wasn't just me, it was a team of people in that office saying, we want this, we want to support, we think this is important. And that is really part of our culture at the university. You know, we have programs, and being committed to a program, saying you have an initiative shows commitment. But along with that, doing things and creating certain environments fosters that. And so it wasn't, I never have to say to someone, please participate in this. People are like, wow, okay, let me see what I can do. And so this is easy to speak about, but the more important part too of that is the support that I get from ADRS. And it's not just Leslie, but mostly Leslie. I think Leslie, I know when Leslie's traveling, because I know when I can reach it. And I know when those dead spots are in Montgomery too. I mean, and Leslie extends herself, as do many of the consumers or counselors there. But we've talked at 8 o'clock at night. We've talked on Saturdays. I've texted her, I'm working late on Friday. Can you help me? I'm, doing things. She is always there to give me that guidance, that things that I maybe just need to talk through. Like, what about this? What happens if we did this? Or I'm thinking about proposing this. Would that be correct? Or if I use this language, what does that mean? And so without a doubt, ADRS is a great supporter. And again, I want to emphasize where you said having someone, a smaller employer may feel like, how do I do this right? And that's how I felt personally. How do I do this right? I had the support of the university behind me, or the initiative, not behind me, the initiative, and the belief that this is a good program and you will carry it. So I was never intimidated that way, but I was more intimidated if I may somehow make a misstep and not do the right. Yeah, it's new territory.
It's a new space.
Right.
Yeah, and it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know.
Thank you. Yes.
You're describing the relationship with Mrs. Dawson and ADRS. It almost comes across as like a business coach for the employer. And I think a lot of that relationship, like, what do you think about this, and getting feedback, from those that maybe know a little bit more about that industry or that community there. And I love the story about you walking by the conference room. And just kind of like
Is it true? Like, I was walking from I was in the refrigerator, and instead of walking out that door, I walked through the conference room.
No. I just imagine you going, when you guys need like one Saturday a month or something, I'll be there. Would sign me up?
Yeah, thank you, Norma and Katie for saying something. And yes, a lot of people like to volunteer, but this is such a rewarding for me, rewarding for the consumer who is placed in a job, rewarding for those who are working around that individual and partnering. That is what I constantly hear as we make these, and it's funny you use matchmaker, because I call it a match. I said, when we have a match, then we'll move forward. What other individuals working with them, around them, are saying they're learning. And isn't that the truth? Like you talked about the value an individual with disabilities brings, and that's the different perspective. That's definitely inclusive of diversity. We all have different backgrounds, and so we bring something different to the table. And an individual with a disability brings far more something different to the table and makes us think differently. They think differently. When we talk about overcoming obstacles, when we talk about this one individual, there you go. When we talk about this specific individual, I use the word tenacious. I've never, just every even little hiccup that came in, how this individual worked through it. And you asked about the position, and that position is a growth position. This is not a...
You're going to be doing this for the next 30 years, but...
No, this is an opportunity. We want them to, well, why can't that individual expect career growth and, and promotions? And I would say this individual definitely has that fortitude to do that. But that's what we are looking for, those types. These are all real posted types of positions with essential functions, but with promobility.
Yeah, and you're looking for someone that is eager and motivated, to do a good job and work up and make that a career.
Yes.
And that kind of hits on the head of there's a lot of talk around making sure individuals that have a disability are on a lot of boards or councils to make sure that, public events, stuff like that, are very accommodating to work their way up there and make those things known. I have a few talking points. I love that you mentioned crossing points. I have a friend in Crossing Points, and we've been able to do a few broadcasts with him about his experience. And so I'm somewhat familiar with the program, but I love everything that I hear about it.
Yes.
And we're currently working on doing a YouTube video about supported decision making versus guardianship, and trying to get that more known in the legal system so that it's an opportunity for individuals that feel like guardianship isn't for them.
Yes.
And then you also mentioned that the ADA, not as many people know. I feel like ADA is a lot of jargon sometimes and can be kind of hard to read. And it would be hard for any one person to know exactly what that says. I'm sure Dr. Graham Sizzle probably knows it back to front. But I feel like individuals should have a better understanding of that for themselves. But always call ADRS if you have questions about it and know what your rights are. I think we're going to start doing a little bit more broadcast on breaking down legal jargon. We had McCartney Hager, who's one of our anchors, and she is a freshman at UAB. This is her first year at UAB. And she just broke down, I want to say it was last week, the Brittany Act, which was the guardianship around Britney Spears and how that has an effect on the disability community. So I'd like to start doing more breaking down of legal jargon to individuals to help them, give them ammo when they see things that they should have and maybe aren't receiving it at that time. That was kind of a side note. And then if you could speak a little bit about the team. You mentioned the team around the new hires and kind of how that changes a little bit for the positive. And you said you'd mentioned that you've seen that a little bit.
Well, everyone has value. And so I think, especially with individuals whose disabilities are more disclosed, people have a better understanding, and it's a more open communication. Because if they come through the PWE program, they have self-disclosed their disability. And so people are more aware, and I think awareness is important. It leads to more open discussion and conversation. But what I'm noticing is how the approach that maybe one person would take in an area of completing a task, they're seeing a different approach. And that is where that is creating or fostering a different value of productivity. So in a different case, another individual that has been hired through this program, they recognize an attribute he has that leads to really paying attention to the small details. And so they have taken some of the steps he does to help incorporate it with other individuals, so they're paying more attention to what they're supposed to be checking, those different items. And so, it's nice when anyone can lend a skill set they have. We're just, I think, recognizing these individuals come with special skill sets that are, valuable.
Yeah, and you get that creativity. Like, I am horrible with the details.
I
would much rather do a little bit. So I have a lot of trouble with it, and I love surrounding myself with people that have different skill sets and are better at certain things than I am. And I think that's when you get a really good team together, is when they always say you want to surround yourself with people that are better and smarter than
Yes.
you in things that you're not. And you want to be, kind of the leader in one skill set for your team, but you want to be able to rely on your team, to solve complex problems and look at it from different advantage points. And as you mentioned, individuals that have disability have a unique way of looking at things.
Yes.
That provide that opportunity there. For employers, speaking to employers, what has been a benefit of the outreach and recruitment to hire individuals? Now, this is we've talked quite a bit.
We've talked, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the next question, how has the partnership with vocational rehab helped University of Alabama with its outreach, recruitment, and retention? We kind of did discuss that a little bit as well. So I'd like to say, what would you like to say to employers that are thinking about reaching out to ADRS?
If you don't have initiative for individuals with disabilities, as many people have different types of initiatives, and this falls under diversity and equity inclusion, talk about that, but when it comes to individuals with disabilities, you have a big supportive network in your state, and that's through ADRS, who not only is going to support you with your questions, your concerns, equipment if needed, but they're also going to be able to provide you a different candidate pool, and we talked about that. I go to her and I say, here's a position, tell me who's available. Now, these individuals may already be out posting for jobs, things, but it allows us to reduce some of those barriers that someone may have concerns with. Not everyone, our traditional interview style doesn't always work. And I would say today's society, I feel today's society still has concerns about disclosing their disability or needing an accommodation even to interview. This program, the PWE program, has allowed us a larger latitude to help accommodate and have better conversations. Doesn't guarantee anyone a job, it's just an opportunity. It's another form of opportunity.
And I have friends, and I encourage them to, as far as they want to talk about, whatever disability they have or struggles they're going through or have had. I always think that communication is the best way to go about it. I think it strengthens the relationship, whether that relationship is with friends, family, employers, employees, that kind of thing. So, but I understand that there may be some reasons that they don't want to talk about those. But I always encourage it. I think at the end it provides the individual with more confidence, and I think it strengthens that relationship.
I think too, I want to add, if we are a community that we do talk about this, and that's what the university wants to recognize, more people will be open about it. Everyone needs to come to address their, I'm going to say disability, but concern or anything at their own due time. No one should be forced to. But if you are in an environment where we embrace it, others are more likely to open about it and then have conversations with others. And that's what we hope our employee resources groups will do too for individuals with disabilities, because even if you are an individual who has say you don't have a disability or you don't disclose a disability, you most likely know someone who's incurred an illness or injury or disability. And I sort of make a joke, if we're all fortunate to live long enough, we will have a disability.
Yeah.
So
I read something the other day that said 1 out of every 2 men will have cancer, 1 out of every 3 women. So you're going to come across challenges in your life if you live long enough. So very well put there. Now we're going to kind of wrap it up here, and I'd like to ask, are there any upcoming events that you guys would like to highlight that maybe we can get in on either online or in person?
Well, actually, our agency has been doing a series of what we call fireside chats, and they're interviews with Alabamians with disabilities, and they talk about their journey to employment. And so we're doing that, of course, for National Disability Employment Awareness Month. And our second one is actually tomorrow. And I can certainly provide you the link for people to register. It's free to attend, and then we have our third one next Thursday as well. Last week was actually Kareem McNeil. He was a former University of Alabama football player who was in a car accident right prior to starting his senior year as a starting, I think it was a right lineman. I may have that wrong, but so he tells his story about acquiring the disability and then what he is doing now, which is working
at Alabama. Roll Tide.
Yeah. So it's a great interview, and we can certainly provide a link to a recording of that one as well.
Now, are these Zooms, or are you doing it on Facebook?
They're Zooms, but we will also, we're live streaming it on YouTube as well.
Okay, so YouTube. So we can put the YouTube link there for you as well.
Sure can.
I like the way you guys do things.
So.
I like that live interview there. Is there anything else at University of Alabama that pops up, upcoming events?
Well, we did have some past events dealing with disability and employment. We had a podcast that we had sponsored for that. But I would encourage individuals just in general to always check our website, find an interest, reach out to your counselor through VR, and they will make contact with me. I'm always looking for, I send posts to her, just one today, saying, tell me if there's any consumers who meet this match. And so the more that are working through Voc Rehab, the more we can help get through the program.
And the last question, is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you think individuals, their families, or employers could benefit from hearing? Mrs. Dawson.
I think we've covered an awful lot. I think that one thing to keep in mind is, as Jamie kind of alluded to, as an employer, they can totally direct, the way forward based on what their need is, and you're absolutely able to pick and choose what services are going to be, best aligned with the company's goals, and just want to reiterate that we are here as a resource and as a partner. And just because we're a state agency, it does not mean that we are enforcement by any means. And we value the partnerships that we have with our businesses and respect their anonymity, and just really want to be there to assist them. For individuals with disabilities and their families, I would say, now is the time. If you were waiting, or if you had any hesitations, now is the time to really check out, come to vocational rehab. I can give you a link for people to connect with us, or then just Google, Alabama Department of Rehabilitation Services, and find out where their vocational rehabilitation office is. Because, employers are more open now than I have ever seen them before to hiring individuals with disabilities and being willing to do that extra, and it's not really extra work.
Whatever needs to be done.
Right.
Yeah. Looking
at creative ways to make a placement work.
And we, as Alabama Care, have worked with ADRS, so I give a shout out to Bobby Stevenson.
Yes, that's right.
And she has helped us have individuals that have been a part of Alabama Care in the past 2 years. I want to say probably 3 people that have worked with Alabama Care we've met through ADRS. So as an employer, I can speak to what you guys do. And appreciate everything you guys do. Mrs. Mitchell, is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like to say to individuals, families, or employers?
Well, this initiative, I hope, will put the University of Alabama on another map, in that we embrace everybody's diversity, including disabilities, and that this is an environment that one feels comfortable disclosing their disability. And so as for myself, I know that leads to better conversation and understanding. And I just really hope that this does kind of take that to the next level, that individuals feel that they can talk about them, because disabilities vary widely. Many still have in their mind the traditional like 3 types of classifications of disabilities, and the government has done a great job in kind of expanding that when you self-ID, but many people still don't understand that can be considered a disability, and there are resources available. And so I hope that our university employees know that we have resources available, and those who come to the university to apply understand our community that is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, you guys are both part of two great organizations in Alabama for the disability community, and I applaud everything that you do and your organizations do. So thank you very much once again for being with us here today. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. If you guys just want to give this camera right here a quick wave, and we'll say see you guys tomorrow.